So, what happened as I grew? No one ever grows out of being autistic, and our brain doesn't just simmer down. My overloads would eventually evolve. One of the things they had eventually evolved into were things I called shutdowns, which include desensitizing myself, withdrawal, and sort of this, what I would call an electrical depression, not really a chemical one, because my body's not pumping chemicals or depriving me of chemicals. It's just I'm going into a really deep funk. It would constantly feel like I've done something wrong or the world was against me, and I was just safer to just shut everything out. One of the things that evolved was I show no signs visibly when I shut down or become desensitized. But internally, I feel pretty crushed and crummy and yucky, but you'll never see it on my face. Another thing that evolved out of it were the temperamental outbursts. Instead of just simply overloading, I became hot headed, short fused, or an explosive personality. Like something has agitated my senses, something has obstructed my routine, or something didn't flow the way I expected. It's like putting a rock on a roller coaster and the rock throwing the car off the tracks. As my brain experienced these overloads and these evolutionary stages, I noticed my brain striving for two different things. The first one was to create a safe space. And a safe space for a brain is not the same thing as being safe for bodily safety. Your brain is looking to let's quiet the noises. Let's stop the all the signals going around. Stop the input to quell the sensory functions. So sometimes a person who's looking for safety in their mind is not going to act that way physically. I would potentially put myself in danger. But again, I just want to put myself in a place where I'm in control. Two of the ways to do this. One is the whole fight or flight scenario that brains go into. The brain feels threatened, and so it starts fighting everybody away, pushing them away, or running away, or just shutting down. I talked about shutting down. One can move to the other, they're not necessarily independent of each other. So multiple things can happen. They're not completely autonomous, but they fall usually one side or the other. And the other thing that happened was my brain started to realize these outbursts are providing me what I call brainy bites. I can hype up the chemicals that the brain likes. Like the brain likes serotonin, dopamine, endorphins, adrenaline, and all those other different things that make the brain go yummy, yummy and become alert. Eventually, I would start creating a brain basket of my emotional inputs, things that stirred me up. And then I would start feeding myself those things in a cycle once I hit an overload. Basically, the cycle was the system is overloaded. Then my brain feeds the thoughts that encourage the body to create the chemicals. The body delivers the chemicals to the brain, and then I just repeat the steps over and over and over and stay in a cycle until something breaks the cycle. Somehow the fuse gets reset. I would notice that I would use the same phrases, same accusations, same memories that would repeat over and over when I got upset. And these things could be anything that could just happen 2 minutes ago to ages ago. Things that on any given normal day would never ever cross my mind. And then my brain returns to a ready state once the cycle is interrupted and the fuse has been fixed. Resetting for me would happen by hyper focusing, getting to a point where I'm zoning out, or I would find some form of deviation, or again, desensitizing myself, numbing myself to external inputs. And not all of the resetting mechanisms were healthy. One of my most unhealthiest resetting methods was my deviation. And normal deviation, like, okay, why don't you go outside? Why don't you go run a little bit? Why don't you go build something? Those can be healthy deviations. But some of my unhealthy ones got to the point where I was viewing people or circumstances as my deviation. I need to talk to this person. I need to hang out with this person. Everything will be all right. I need this specific set of occurrences to happen and everything will be all right. Other times it would be like food. I go eat this and then everything will be all right. Or I go someplace and everything will be all right. Or I had some bad habit that I would use. And some of those things, I mean, talking to someone isn't a bad thing. Going to a place isn't a bad thing. The problem becomes when you're completely dependent on that circumstance or person or thing or whatever it is, and not willing to break your cycle until that condition is met. Healthy resetting has to be intentional. It's not just going to happen. Though sometimes the brain does spontaneously decides a method of resetting. One occurrence that I had was in my preteens. I was probably about 12, 13, 14. And I had this thing where if I dropped something, I would spontaneously melt down into a rage. I mean, absolutely furious. And I recall an event where I dropped a pencil and I was about ready to go into my cycle of rage and anger that I dropped a pencil. And I remember my brain going, why get upset? What does it accomplish? What are you doing or gaining from this getting upset? And I started to desensitize myself when certain things like dropping pencils happen, which again, it seems like a maturing or growing up, but the route that I was going about it led me to become desensitized towards various events that maybe I should have been able to respond to, but I had gotten to the point where I just said, why bother? Why respond? Why react? So it migrated into something unhealthy, what should have been a simple stage of maturity. Shutdowns that I'm talking about and the whole desensitization seem more socially acceptable than meltdowns or temperamental outbursts because they're a reduced visible and audible reaction. But in the long run, they become more internally destructive. They start wearing down a person's self esteem, their personal drive, their ability to respond to things. As mentioned, not all previous methods to reset my fuse were healthy. And the things that I had to learn to do as I began to understand what I was doing was to gain control of my thoughts. I had to reset with intent, and I could not rely or wait on external stimuli to reset. I couldn't wait on people, I couldn't wait on places or things or habits because those couldn't be my absolutes that I needed to reset. I needed to be able to reset by choice. And as I got older, I did learn how to switch things off and on intentionally to blow a fuse or replace it on command. I still got overloaded, but my command over my switches grew.